we've just lost ourselves in this trauma bond. Who are you? What are your attachment patterns? How are you wired for love? What are your personality traits? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Right? And really to start to educate them, A, about what they've endured, because education leads to empowerment.
Welcome to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm Denise Satova, your host. And today we are literally peeling back the layers of a story that's as wild as actually a movie. And literally, it became a movie. Dr. Nadine Macaluso, known to her patients as Dr. Nay, she's joining me here today. A long time coming. I'm very excited. You might recognize her story as the inspiration behind Naomi Belfort's character in The Wolf of Wall Street. Wow, what a movie. But tell you, the real story is even more intense. Dr. Nay, she survived roller coaster 8-year marriage to Jordan Belfort, complete with chaos, trauma, abuse, exactly what you'd expect from watching Wolf himself. And here's where it gets really interesting. She didn't just survive. She has been thriving, and I love that. Dr. Nay, she picked herself up, she moved to California, and at 39, she decided to become a psychotherapist and to share her own experience to help others. And now she's got PhD in somatic psychotherapy. She's helping others to heal from their own trauma. Dr. Nay, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Denise. So yes, we've been trying to make this happen and we did it.
Yes. We started briefly chatting and I said, let's save this great energy and dive right in. So let's start with the elephant in the room. What was it really like being married to Jordan Belfort during those wild Wall Street days? And not only that, how did you guys meet?
Yeah, well, it was wild and crazy and like I call it dysfunction junction because it was filled with I was such a young girl and I didn't know at all what I was stepping into, of course. I could have never imagined what my life would have entailed with him, which was, you know, we met actually at a party like the movie shows. And I walked into his party with my boyfriend at the time. And all these people were acting crazy. And I didn't know they were all on Quaaludes because I didn't even know what a Quaalude was. And as the movie depicts, someone exposed themselves to me. And I felt so embarrassed and left because I felt so much shame, even though it wasn't mine to carry. And then I guess he had seen me and set his sights on me and pursued me vehemently till finally we went on a first date.
There's just I can't even imagine. I mean, so you wait a second. So you went from being in the spotlight as a Wall Street wife with all the chaos, all the trauma that really is, at least to some degree, depicted in this movie, to becoming a healer, essentially, psychotherapist. So how did the transition happen? What drove this dramatic career shift?
Yeah, so when I first met my ex, the Wolf of Wall Street, at 22, 23, our life was so unmanageable. I said, I have to get myself into therapy. I just knew back then that there was no way I would survive it on my own. And so I went to therapy throughout the whole marriage. And I do really believe that that allowed me to survive. It really did. And now I wish my therapist would have said, hey, you're in a trauma bond with a pathological person, but she didn't. Nobody spoke about this back then, right? Over 20 years
Yeah.
ago. And so then I picked my kids up and moved to Los Angeles. And at 39, I was living in LA and doing yoga and meditating and drinking green juice like we tend to do there. And during the meditation, I was like, I'm going to go back to school to be a therapist. And then I just did it.
Just like that.
Just like that, I made up my mind because I knew that therapy had saved me, and I wanted to be of service to people and really help them, because I just know how useful it is now. I didn't know that I was going to make trauma bonds and helping people leave pathological relationships as my specialty. What happened was that as I was getting my doctorate and the movie was coming out, simultaneously, I was seeing so many smart, kind, beautiful women trauma bonded. And I was like, oh, no, this is a problem. We have a problem. And that's when I went back to the research to write my book.
How do you describe that? What is trauma bond?
Sure. So a trauma bond is a toxic, dysfunctional relationship between two emotionally connected people, but it has to have two components for it to be a true trauma bond. It first has to have a power imbalance where one
Mm,
of the partners has more of the power. That can happen, they have more resources. That can happen because they're very threatening and dominating, or simply the fact that we love them, right? They
mm,
can have power over us. And the second thing is something called intermittent reinforcement, which is where 70% of the time they're very punishing and cruel and controlling. But that
mm.
30% of the time, they're warm and generous and kind and helpful. And so those extreme behaviors cause extreme feelings inside of us. And that's actually the bond in the trauma bond.
Wow, so it could be disguised. It's almost like I'm just trying to just picture that it's maybe somebody would describe it as maybe not a codependence, but I can see how you're in a relationship and there is you experience those warm feelings. You have the some of the positive experiences, and there is almost it creates a safety net because you may have experienced your own trauma that you're carrying from your childhood. So there are moments in that relationship where you feel like, this person really gets me, and almost you're willing to overlook this big chunk where, the 70%. Have you been finding that sort of people are almost like in denial?
Well, it's so complicated because what the research shows is that animal trainers who use intermittent reinforcement, the animals bond to them 230% more than straight kindness. So
Mm,
just the behavioral act of intermittent reinforcement, no matter who you are, whether you've had trauma or not, causes you to bond with somebody. And what I think is that that love bombing stage in the beginning is so head over heels and just so much dopamine and endorphins running that when you're in it, you're like, oh, every time they're nice, you're like, wait, maybe they are nice. So I
yeah.
always say hope is the hook, right? Because you think they're going to go back to that initial way of being, but they don't, because really the pathological person wants power and control over you.
Mm,
So it's not so
wow.
much that you overlook it, it's more that like you're hopeful.
You're hopeful. Right, right. So
Yeah.
it's not like you intentionally overlook, it's like, maybe I'm
Yeah.
just yes, okay, because you've experienced it, and so that feeling is there,
Yes.
and so it you yeah, okay, I can feel it. That is very complicated. Oh my gosh, especially because it seems like there's a prevalent fear, and I think that goes for people in general, the
Yes.
fear of being alone.
Of course, yeah, because we're social beings. We're built for connection, right? So now, if you do combine that with someone who has an anxious attachment or has fear of abandonment or is financially dependent on their spouse or they have kids, right? So
Yeah.
many different layers now come in. And that's why they say it takes a trauma bonded woman 4 to 7 times to leave a trauma bond.
Wow, that's okay. I wanna stay there, but before we continue on this path, going back to the movie, I'm curious, and I know some of our
Yeah.
viewers, listeners curious as well. It portrayed your life. How accurate was the depiction, basically, and what did they get wrong about you?
They got a lot of it right. I mean, I know it seems like so over the top crazy, but it really was that crazy and over the top. The drug addiction, the fast and furious lifestyle, the yachts, the tons of money. what they got wrong was that, well, my ex wrote a book. So the movie was from a book that he wrote. But what happened was that in the movie, they show us fighting over women all the time. We never fought about women. We fought about his drug addiction, but he wanted to portray it like that. So that's his perspective, and that's fine. But really, we fought mostly about his drug addiction.
Mm, really, it doesn't even matter, right? It's like, here you are. So that's you went through this life change, and used your own experience to heal others. Um, so you talk about post-traumatic growth. So how would you so let's talk about the transition. How do you
Yeah.
actually get through the transition, from, when you met Jordan, where you became smitten basically, to someone who now who's helping others today? And I know it doesn't happen overnight. You had some therapy, but was it something in your mind where you came to a realization? What was that it took? Because I know many women who talk about wanting to do it, right? They have endless therapy sessions and they just are unable to move forward.
You mean like what was the final thing that
For
got me to
you.
leave him? Yeah. So for
Yes,
me,
yes.
I always say I got very lucky because my ex-husband got arrested. So,
Mm,
so, so, so when you're in a trauma bond, right, they're always blaming you. The pathological partner's like, you made me do this. You're the reason. And they're always playing the victim, even though they're the perpetrator of abuse. And you start to believe that a little bit, right? And
mm,
then also, my ex-husband had so much power, I was afraid to leave him. Would he say
mm.
I was a drug addict? And would he try to take my kids? And, he had so much money and power, I knew he could buy people. And so once he got arrested, though, it was so clear, you're bad and I'm good. You're a criminal and I'm not. And so I knew I had that window and I took it.
Incredible. And then you wrote a book called Run Like Hell. And I think you said in your
Yeah,
book that healing begins the moment you stop running from yourself and you start running toward the life you've always deserved. I found that really powerful, how you emphasized that leaving, it's not just about getting up and leaving and escaping the relationship physically, but also about
correct.
moving toward a life that's filled with possibilities. What is your advice, or how do you work with someone who's in that paralyzed state that you mentioned, who's so scared?
Yeah. Yeah, so when you're in a trauma bond, you're so focused on this other person because they've made it that way. So the first thing I say is turn the mirror back on you,
Mm,
right? We've just lost ourselves in this trauma bond. Who are you? What are your attachment patterns? How are you wired for love? What are your personality traits? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Right? And really to start to educate them, A, about what they've endured, because education leads to empowerment, as you and I
mm,
know, and
yes.
also get really curious about who they are and start to
Mm,
build up their self esteem and self confidence because it's not my role to tell them when to leave, right? I always say my poor therapist sat with me to 7 to 8 years every week. So I have to be patient with these women. But I really use a lot of psychoeducation with them and it works.
yeah, you're not just telling them, "Just leave." It's almost like
No,
you're walking that journey with them, you're almost providing that safety net, but ultimately it has to be their decision to make that
exactly,
first.
exactly. Correct,
Wow,
correct. I'll go to court with them. I'll go to
wow.
mediation with them. I will sit on Zooms with them. I will do whatever it takes to be that, like you say, that security net till they can feel it within themselves.
Wow, incredible.
Thank
I've
you.
been seeing your social media posts, and I think people will immediately get drawn to the sensational stuff, and it's The Wolf of Wall Street, obviously. It was a, powerful movie, and it's entertaining, But I love how you're using that, it's almost the messaging is so powerful because as you describe the trauma bond, I'm thinking I'm obviously in the divorce industry and I see couples and I see the
Yeah,
power imbalance touching money, or even
sure.
just, it goes beyond physical abuse. I mean, all in all sorts of areas
Right.
and aspects of their lives.
That's right.
And some spouses cannot leave because they don't have the means, and the others dragging it on purpose, right? So there's that
Yeah.
punishment. I'm going to
Oh,
make you
yeah.
suffer.
Oh, yeah.
Horrible. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, well, that's what happens too, is a lot of women are afraid to leave, or people, we'll just say people, because then there's
yeah.
post-separation abuse through the legal system.
Mm,
I even have a legal abuse scale on my website to
wow.
see if people feel like they're being, because you have to remember this person wanted power and control over you. Once you
Yeah.
leave, most of the time they're not just going to be like, okay, see you later.
So true.
That's why it's
Yeah.
great to have a great divorce attorney. And a lot of times I work with the attorney, we get a divorce coach in, and me. We create like a wraparound effect for these people to be able to handle it. And
That's
they
good
can
to
do it,
know.
as you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they can do it. Yeah, because it's part of your identity that has sort of there's that creates this void, and whether it was good or bad, it was something. Now there's this void. What do I do with it? How do I fill it? Who am I?
Yes.
That doesn't happen overnight, but making that first step to wanting some change, very, very important. How how has your past experience, the one that you've described, how has that influenced your approach to relationships now or relationship?
Yeah, I've been with my husband for 25 years now, so we're doing great. Actually, it's so nice to live in a drama-free household, or it's not boring. It's awesome. And when I first met my husband, of course, I was afraid to trust. I was like, "Oh, I can't trust anybody." But on our first argument, I said to him how I felt, and he goes, "Yeah, I hear that." And I was like, "What? No." And I couldn't believe that he could listen to me, right? And I always say, if somebody can't hear you, they can't love you. And I think what's
Mm,
worked in our marriage is that we've both been willing to change when the other one said, hey, you're a little out of line here, or the way you're behaving is really hurting my feelings. We can hear it and then take action. So our words and actions match.
mm.
And in trauma bond, that doesn't happen.
That is powerful. Yeah, I say it's almost like making sure that you are whole on your own as individuals, and then you come
Yes.
together like 1 and plus 1 is 11, in other words, rather than, right, being
Yes. Yeah.
you complete me. To me, that's bullshit. I don't believe in that. No
Yes.
one should complete you, right, other than you.
No. Right. Right. But we've been fed those like Disney myths,
Yeah,
right? And we've
yeah,
been telling women forever, someday your prince will come, someday he's going to save you. Ain't nobody coming to save you. You
yeah.
you are the protagonist of your own journey. And so that's what I really work with them, is to empower them, right? And teach them about autonomy and having agency, and they're open. Once you're at that point and you've been controlled and manipulated and gaslit and lied to for so long, they are just like, whatever it takes, get me out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could see how this actually could be, where social media could have a positive impact because maybe more women are sharing, people in general. I'm sure this happens to men plenty as
Yes,
well.
it
People in
does.
general,
Yes,
they're using it as a platform to really talk about it. What's acceptable, what isn't acceptable. Um, and look, I mean, I've been through a lot as a young girl, but I also recognize that, our parents didn't have the tools. Their parents didn't have the
that's
tools, or
right.
maybe there are a lot of taboos, but now we can talk
Yes,
about it. Yeah. What what do you
yeah.
enjoy doing when you're not working?
Oh, well, I'm always working, but no,
Okay, okay.
I
So
love,
outside of work.
yeah, yeah, no, I love to garden. I love to exercise. I love being with my grandchildren. I like to cook. Like if I wasn't a therapist, I'd be an interior designer. I'm always
Really?
redecorating. Yeah, yeah. I love to do that. I like, I have a very creative side of me, and I think that social media gives me that entree into that creative side where I get expression with that. And I have two dogs who I enjoy. Very simple things after my very extravagant lifestyle, but very simple things.
Do you find peace in that, the simplicity?
Yes. I do. I do. That doesn't mean I'm not a clothes horse. I mean, like I have my things that I love,
Yeah,
but I do,
right.
I'm still a girl, but I
Yeah.
do find as I've gotten older, just simple and easy and quiet. It's all okay.
Hmm. What is your pet peeve about people in general?
Well, I hate dishonesty.
Mm,
I really, I'd rather just tell me the truth, even if it's going to hurt me. I can take it. I
mm,
just need full transparency. And I just don't think there's any other way to have a healthy relationship, if you're not fully transparent. That's a huge, huge pet peeve of mine. I won't stand for it.
mm. Um, mine, it's almost like this people pleasing, and it's I'm finding that the holding back of sort of the speaking up or telling the truth or
Yes,
it comes from a position of fear, fear of overreaction, fear of
yes,
loss, fear of you will leave me, abandon me.
that's
Yeah,
right.
and
That's right.
that's a problem these days.
It, it's a problem because not everybody's going to like you, and not
No.
everybody's going to like what we say. And, I know that, but what I work with people on is tolerate the feeling you have inside when you disappoint people.
Mm, sit with
We're all
it.
going to
Don't be
disappoint
afraid of it.
people. Yeah, sit with
Yeah.
it. Be with it. Be
Yeah.
with it. And be straightforward, because if you're not, then you're going to swim in a reservoir of resentment, and that's not their
Mm.
fault.
No. No, that's interesting. I've sort of had a paradigm shift about that because I used to be like, well, he's triggering or she's triggering me. No, I am being triggered and becoming curious as
That's
to
right.
why it's mine. That's my
That's
stuff
right.
that I'm bringing in. Yeah, that is a huge
That's right.
difference.
That's right. That's right. And notice we all get triggered, but all that trigger is a moment, right, to get curious
Hmm.
and say, oh, why does this bother me? And I don't know about you, but as I've gotten older, I just don't take anything personally. And it's so
Bingo.
freeing.
Yes. 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 That has been my go-to phrase is if it's my husband's doing it or we're seeing our friends doing it, colleagues, and I'm thinking, see, that's where it's coming from. You're taking it personally. It's somebody doing something to you. And it's so freeing when you can turn it around and say, well, I have a control
So
to
freeing.
how I respond to it. As you know, ego comes in a way and possibly can be me, but it is so freeing. I am
Yeah.
with you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so
It's
true.
so freeing because everybody's just suffering and trying to make their way in the world,
Yeah.
right? And they're working through all of their own psychological issues. And so most of the time it really has nothing to do with us.
No. It's right. And they bring like their own stuff and you don't have to swim in the trash. Yeah,
That's
that is
right.
so
That's
true.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dr. Nate, would you like to share any parting thoughts?
Yeah, that if you are in a trauma bond, please don't isolate. Please reach out. Please look for the helpers. They're everywhere. Don't feel ashamed. You know, don't feel ashamed for somebody abusing you. That's their shame to carry. And reach out today to anybody. and just say what you're experiencing. And that's the first step out for help, is to really acknowledge and accept if you're in a toxic, dysfunctional relationship. And if you face it and process it and do the work, you will get to the other side.
Mm,
That
very
much I
powerful.
know.
And you know, because you've been there, you've lived it, and that's why it makes it so much more effective and it's completely authentic. It's been such pleasure having you on the show, and I'll have you back. I have no doubt. Thank you
I
so
would love
much.
it. I would love
Yeah.
it. Thank you so much for having me, Denisa.
And for our listeners who want to learn more about Dr. Nadine Macaluso and her work, how to get hold of her, make sure that you visit her website and check out her book, Run Like Hell, at the links posted below. And of course, do not forget to hit the subscribe button to our Beyond the Bar podcast. Follow us on all social media platforms. And until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.